So, hello, welcome to the aspect, a particular mode of viewing panel discussion with all the artists here involved in the show. We're just going to talk to you guys a bit today about the show that we were putting on, why we were doing it, our practices in general, and the current temperament that we're all in now. So we started Aspect as a way to bring together video artists who are all looking at similar themes, these themes being materiality of video, the fundamental elements of video, or just structural film, anything that comes under that kind of bracket. And we held an open call for that, and we got these great people involved. Yeah, pretty much why we did it. Beth, do you want to explain the open call a little bit?
So we sent out the open call and sent it around universities and sent it to different institutions, and we were looking for artists that were inspired mainly by duration, temporality, light, space and sound, and we're looking for artists that want to present their work in maybe an unconventional way. We wanted to be really ambitious with the exhibition, and we had a lot of plans for how things were going to be curated and presented. So we were looking for people that were really wanting to challenge film as a medium. So we've got I think we're missing one artist today, Josh. But yeah, should we start with Maddie, if you want to tell us about your practice?
Yeah, so I'm in first year, but I did a foundation, so I've kind of been I've been doing filmmaking for maybe a year primarily as kind of my main medium, I suppose. I use quite a lot of spoken word stuff, and normally my work is pretty experimental. Yeah, and the piece that I did for Aspect was, I think, the first installation kind of video that I've done before. So most of my work is just kind of screen based, but I've been trying to experiment with new ways of working as well.
And then Alan, your practice?
So yeah, my practice has pretty much been entirely video for probably about 2 years now, I think, and it's kind of built a lot around kind of how text and image plays together, and a lot of it is kind of subjectless a bit, people don't really play a big role in it. A lot of it's very kind of still kind of shots, and it's very kind of minimalist, I think. And I think more recently I've been moving more onto work that centers around architecture and space and stuff like that.
And Lucy?
Yes, so I graduated from Leeds Arts University last year doing fine art, and then I went to Berlin for 3 months to do an experimental filmmaking course there. And yeah, again, kind of like Alan, I do a lot of stuff exploring environments and spaces, and kind of linking the kind of structural nature of film, the physical aspects of film into a place and into kind of the liminal places. Yeah.
And Leo?
So I do sort of a combination of audio and visual. Sometimes it's just sound pieces as well, but I have been looking at sort of, I don't know, conceptual installations, stuff that create uncomfortable viewing environments, and it predominantly focuses around film. And with the piece I was working on when Aspect, the open call, was released, I really wanted to sort of push the installation part of that, so that was a good opportunity to be able to start testing the actual physical installation of it as well, and how that plays a part in the interpretation of the piece as well.
Archie?
Sorry, I couldn't figure out how to unmute myself. My practice is mostly centered around human ontology and how we perceive our reality. Most of it comes from the idea of subjective time and the experience of time being subjective. I also like my art to be viewer responsive, so I'm very concerned with the observer, how people view my work and how people interact with it. And I try and create works that only exist when people are interacting with them, that they're responding to the space-time that the observer's inhabiting. and that's by multiplying or delaying or doing loads of these things that you can do with like digital media. And a lot of my practice is centered around that at the moment, installation based. There's a good quote from an artist who says, my work is like the light in a fridge. It's only there when you open the fridge. If not, it's just stuff in a room. I think that relates a lot to my practice.
That's really cool. And my practice is, it started out being based around structural film, like through an exploration of time and kind of like coming into film as somebody that had never made films before. I kind of like wanted to know everything about it, like as a material. So I kind of came from that, and then I'm kind of coming more into the conceptual side of film and how it links to like cinematic tropes and like ways of creating tension and moving into installation and things, looking at dreams and repetition philosophy kind of thing. So yeah, like I don't know, I feel like there's, with all of our work, there's kind of like a common thread running through, is that we're concerned with the way that film is viewed by the viewer and the film as a medium. So yeah, so we've put together a few questions just to talk about film. So the first one is, do you consider yourself to be a film artist? So should we start again with Maddie?
I go first every time.
Oh, I'm sorry, we can mix it up.
Okay.
I'll mix it up next time.
No, it's fine. I think, yeah, no, definitely, because I used to be, so when I started off, I was literally I was doing like a lot of painting, a lot of specifically oil painting, but it felt really restrictive. So I would do kind of very realistic style portraits, that kind of thing. I didn't feel particularly like expressive. So when I moved into film, I've kind of tried a bit of like photography and sculptural stuff, but it's kind of been the most fluid and like expressive way to create work, in my opinion, when I've like done, and like also all of the stuff you can do with like the manipulation of film, like editing, that kind of thing, and how I can kind of incorporate like word into it has just like kind of made it my favorite way of working, basically. Yeah.
Leo, would you consider yourself to be a film artist, or call yourself a film artist?
Well, definitely right now I would, but I do a lot of work with just sound as well, because sound is a huge aspect of the films that I make. I guess generally I would say more of sort of installation artist, because my practice is more about the experience of viewing. But definitely for now, sort of that the audio visual is the primary medium that I work through. So because I just find it most effective at what I'm trying to convey. But maybe not in total. I wouldn't say I was just like exclusively a film artist, but currently it's definitely my main route.
So Archie, would you consider yourself to be a film artist, or like do you find it problematic if you get described as a film artist or anything?
I mean, somewhat. I wouldn't say I'm primarily a film artist. I think I'm a installation, maybe kind of artist. I mean, I started off as a painter and I still paint, and then I moved to sculpture and I still sculpt, and now I'm doing video. And I guess all of my work does come back to being a screen-based medium. But whether I'm just a video artist or an installation artist who uses screens as a medium, I don't know if I could put myself in either of those boxes. Really, I'm kind of flowing through, trying to grab hold to anything really. But yeah, I think it's, I don't know, I don't want to differentiate either. You know, like a Swiss Army knife of art tools. That's what I want to be.
That's a good way of looking at it. Alan, what would you consider yourself to be, a film artist, or?
Yeah, I think I am. That, or to just be really pedantic and say a video artist, just because I would never want to give the illusion that I'm actually not lazy and that I actually use film, when really I'm very lazy and I prefer to stick to digital video. It's easier.
And Lucy?
Yeah, I think I call myself a filmmaker. But yeah, also an artist. Yeah, I don't want to limit myself to just filmmaking over this is what I've been using film for the past 3 years now. So, but it's a good to kind of branch out.
I think it's interesting, like you say, Alan, that you use your, like, as you would put it, laziness as like a way to do digital stuff. And I think that's with me also. I've never had the monetary or the effort to put into film. I think it's important as artists, you know, see what they can do with what they have. I mean, all my monitors that I use for screens, all my installations, they're off like Facebook Marketplace. And I think sometimes just where you are can influence your art as well a lot as what you want it to be, you know.
Yeah, I agree. I also kind of find it like problematic to call myself a film artist, especially because I've not come from a film background, because you get people that have studied film as like an A-level or whatever, and so like when I kind of started, I just felt like I was just going into the unknown basically. But I guess like that perspective is kind of what has interested me in structural film, because it's like a raw kind of thing, like a kind of raw perspective. You can use it how you want to use it basically. But I think I'd maybe call myself like, I think I change it every week. I don't know, maybe. Yeah, I'm not sure. Next question. What cameras have you used, analog or digital? I'll start this time and put the spotlight on myself. I've used Super 8 camera, Super 8 film, sorry. So that's like a really old medium of filmmaking, and it's really, really great, but it's very unpredictable. So I don't use it a lot, and sometimes you can pay £15 for like an old roll that just won't develop. And I've got a camera too that's really, really old, so it's kind of like it rarely ever works. But when it does, it's really special. So I would still consider myself to be using that and still experimenting with it when I can. But I've been using a lot more digital film recently because it's a lot more reliable. And when you've got like exhibitions and things to prepare for, you need something that you can like rely on. But as part of Aspect, we wanted to have like a bit of a Super 8 screening. I had a few films that I wanted to show, like using the little Super 8 projector Eddie Lockhart always used to lend me. So I had a few like test ones and some ones that like had been more thought out. And also Lucy had some that she was going to show that she shot in Berlin. So yeah, I'll go to Lucy. What film have you used and how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I've used digitals. I've used like A7s, but also like my really rubbish camcorder that I got for like 30 quid off Amazon, which has now become my staple since graduating uni and not having any access to any good equipment. But yeah, I used Super 8 for the first time in Berlin, and that was amazing because they got a really good like lab there. I can't remember the name of the lab, but like proper professional, like developing equipment, digitizing equipment there. Whereas when I was here in England, I found like, it was really expensive to buy as a student. So I never used it. And then I used a camera called a Lomo Kino. It's this really cheap plastic camera from Lomography. And you can put like still 35mm film in it, and it does it like 6 frames a second, and it comes out like really thin on each one. But that was fun to use and experiment with before I actually got my hands on some proper celluloid that was actually made for filmmaking.
Cool. As Archie, what film cameras do you use?
So I'm mostly a digital filmmaker. I have just a Canon DSLR, and I use that primarily. But recently, I've just been using my phone. My camera's actually still at uni, and uni's obviously locked off to everyone. It's the only thing I have. And I did a piece recently called Durations, which was a collection of people sitting for as long as they can doing nothing. And the problem with the DSLR is it stops recording after about 20 minutes. And I had people that sat for about 2.5 hours. So I had to use my phone for that, because your phone will record until it runs out of memory. So I find myself more and more moving further away from like the normal ways you'd film stuff and just doing it on my phone. It's always in my pocket. It's decent enough quality and it will record for eons. So yeah, mostly just that.
Leo?
So I've never actually used any analog for like filmmaking, but I started actually making filming underwater. So I started with a really cheap Aldi version of a GoPro, which was about £15. And it wasn't even mine, someone just gave it to me. But it's pretty much actually the main camera that I use, and it's very bad quality, but it provides like an interesting look to I don't even know, wouldn't be able to describe it, just very bad. But I've pretty much always used really old cameras that I've just had like passed down through the family, because I can't really afford to get, like, when I've shot on the DSLR, it's always been from uni. So I've got a camera from the 90s that was like it's gone through literally every member of my family. I've got the camera that my dad used to film us like in the early 2000s, like as little kids. But yeah, my main like camera that I use is actually the really cheap GoPro knockoff.
Yeah, that's really cool. I've used GoPros as well, like for sculptural films that I've been doing. So yeah, it's interesting that you said that, because yeah, that's like a really experimental kind of freeing way of using film as well, when you kind of like subject it to different environments and things like that. I feel like Maddie, have you what films have you used? What types of medium?
Yeah, I mainly go. I film on my Canon DSLR mostly, and I have a really cheap kind of crappy camcorder that it's just the main reason I use it is because it's so easy to like bring places. Like I can just kind of take it anywhere, and the quality is not great, but I kind of like that sometimes. In like some of my films, I kind of prefer that to like a really clean shot. It just feels a bit more kind of like abstract almost. But I've also used my flatmate has like a tape camera as well, and it's just like a really old one from a charity shop, but we used that for a while, and it was actually really fun to film on. The quality was like surprisingly good, but still looked just like really old. And then we could never get it off of the tape. we had no idea how to get it off of the tape, so it was just kind of stuck on there, but I have used that. But yeah, mainly it's just kind of like digital stuff. I haven't really used analog, but it would be something really cool to try, I think, in the future. But obviously for like money reasons and stuff, it's not super realistic right now.
I think it's interesting how we're like happy to use lower quality cameras, and I think that Hito Sterol always she's in defense of like the poor image, and says that, you know, a high quality image leaves nothing to the imagination. It's kind of just exactly what it is, but those lower quality images become a bit more enticing. And it's interesting to see that a lot of you guys are into that. That's cool.
It feels like when you use quite a low quality camera and you kind of use like a zoom, like a long sort of zoom or something like that, it just turns it into a completely different picture. Like it's nothing like real life. It doesn't look like something real. It just looks like something completely abstract, and I quite enjoy that. So
Is it just Alan that I haven't asked, because I'm getting like confused with the order?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've pretty much only ever used my DSLR, but like Archie, more recently I've started playing a little bit with just using my phone instead. I think there's something quite well already with using digital is a lot more freeing and kind of democratic, and the phone is just an even more extension of that. You know, it's not very good quality, but there's something quite freeing about being able to use something like that.
So leading from that question, I thought we would just go to the future of media, because that kind of seems to link in with this question. So how do you feel about the future of media in respects to the relations between analog and digital media? So like, do we feel that like analog film is going to be forgotten, or like digital film will eventually turn into something else? Like, where are we going? And like with things being kind of discontinued, like for me especially, I know that the Super 8 film, they don't actually make it anymore, so like it's kind of hard like to to get it, and then it's hard to develop it as well. So the methods that I use to develop my own Super 8 film is just by using chemicals that you use to develop photographs, and there's like just a little kind of calculation that somebody just told me, like through like the word of mouth kind of thing. So like that's how I developed my own films, because otherwise I would be having to spend like hundreds of pounds sending it off to companies that are still doing it, but then maybe those companies will also kind of go extinct. So how does everybody feel about the future of film? Should we start with Archie?
Yep. I mean, I believe it's interesting to think about it, isn't it? The way that we've evolved from analog to digital, and if there will be anything after digital, if there'll be a new type of technology that will overtake digital, and then that will become somewhat prehistoric, for lack of a better word. But I think within artists and within art, I think all of these things will continue to have a life. You have mediums such as bronze, which isn't used anymore day to day. It's kind of completely finished its life, but then the artists pick it up and they sculpt in bronze and they cast in bronze. And I think throughout time, artists will always pick up materials from the past and mediums and keep exploring them and keep resurfacing them. And hopefully that continues to happen with analog and digital.
Maddie, how do you feel about film and its future?
Well, my boyfriend works basically completely in analog photography. I mean, I know it's maybe not super relevant, but because he's not listening. Yeah, he's always worked in analog photography, and a lot of people have been like, kind of, they've asked him why he still does that when it's so much more effort than digital. And I mean, maybe it's not answering the question, but there is something so much more beautiful about like seeing film photos compared to digital photos. Like there's something really a bit different about it. And I haven't really worked in like film before, like film. But I think it's kind of like a way that people like working, and they like kind of I think people will keep it alive if it's like something that they enjoy working with. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm not sure I already answered it. Yeah.
Lucy, how do you feel about film and digital film?
I think digital is always going to keep evolving. Like I know the Irishman used this new technology with I can't remember what type of thing they did, but they did it so they could completely block out all the contrast and to get just the actor faces, so they could do that digital de-aging on Robert De Niro. But I think, yeah, like Archie said, artists are always gonna pick it back up, even if it goes out of style. Like even when everyone was saying how they loved how low quality things were, it's always gonna have like video just on like a rubbish camcorder is gonna have an aesthetic quality and some limitations that make it interesting to use. And that's kind of where I think like analog film is now. Because like I remember when I was at uni, I got accused of being really nostalgic when I like once said that I wanted to use like Super 8 or 16mm, and that was quite interesting because you know I when I was like younger, I remember just like it being filmed on tape, not on celluloid film. I think a lot of people now don't even know what celluloid film even was. So it's interesting as the kind of new generation is being introduced to film as a medium. It's really interesting to see where everyone's going with it. So I don't think it will die out quite yet. At least I hope it doesn't.
Leo, how do you feel about the future of film and digital film as well?
Well, I think there will always be the sort of idea of like, vintage and retro. So even what we're working with now, even if it sort of does, I don't know, go, like age, at a certain point it will come back around, because there's always people looking back to sort of stuff that was used in the past. So I think even if it ages slightly, once it's aged sort of almost even more, it will kind of come back around. But I was recently working on a project with York University where we were doing it was like a 360 camera. The whole shoot was a 360, but like maybe about 50% of it is going to be just fully VR. Like, it's not even real. But so I do think a lot of film work is moving into the sort of virtual reality now, like almost just completely erasing cameras. But I don't think they'll ever just die out. I think it'll always just come back around as sort of like retro or vintage and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's kind of like picking up on like what Lucy was saying about like the problem of being like vintage as well, and like labeled as that kind of like nostalgic. Like I found that also kind of hard to escape as well with using Super 8 film, because it was kind of like, what am I harping back to another time? And I didn't feel like that's what I was doing. But my main thing with analog film is that like you can touch it, and I think that's because like I've come from a sculptural background, so like I've made sculptures with film as well as actually using the film for like projections and things like that. And I think there's something really special about like when you have developed it and you pick it up and there's actually something on it. And like, yeah, I think it's more than just like a vintage thing as well. So yeah. Alan, how do you feel about film and the future of film?
I think film is always going to be around. I think if anything, I'm slightly negative about it, because I think a lot of film has a kind of problematic like purity to it. It's often seen as like the pure form of cinema, and the more digital recent stuff is somehow impure compared to what it used to be. And it survived this long. I really can't see it somehow managing to die out. I think just because of the material cost, it will never be the mainstream kind of thing anymore. But I think it'll be interesting to see where digital goes, though. I really don't see where it could go. I mean, there's a lot of sort of observations about how a lot of like mainstream filmmaking is now starting to look into technology that can replicate physical film through digital. So it's this sort of thing of they're sort of recycling it already, and it's a kind of a weird thing they're starting to do now.
Yeah, that's really interesting, everyone. Thank you. So the next question, I feel like we could go on to. Oh, I just had a notification saying it can go for more time, so we don't have to worry about time. So that's good. Sorry, distracted. So should we just go on to the question, do you think it's important to make distinctions between cinema and video art, and if so, what are those distinctions? So I feel like Alan wrote this question onto the document. Yeah, I think so. So I found like that at the time I didn't really know what to make of the question, so I thought about it, and then I found that it was kind of like more relevant to me than what I thought, because I made a film recently called A Portrait of a Lady with No Head, and the title was influenced by a film that's just come out recently, A Portrait of a Lady on Fire. So I was really inspired by that film, and I didn't make the film directly after that, but like I felt like the way that I made the film was so influenced by the director that made that film. So I feel like they're very closely connected, and like sometimes I feel like they're like interwoven, I feel. And I don't know, has anyone got any thoughts on that? Should we go to Alan first, because he said the question?
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting question, just because kind of the cinema and the art gallery can overlap in so many ways, and yet they are so kind of distinct from one another. Like, you know, for example, in a cinema, you could only show something at a certain duration. Like, you couldn't really show a film that goes beyond 3.5 hours. But in an art gallery, because it's more on a loop and people come in at different times, they leave at different times, no one sees something from beginning to end necessarily. So things could go on for way longer. I mean, it works the same, just kind of the further you get away from convention, the more the art gallery becomes appealing compared to a cinema theatre. But I think it's also an issue of kind of industry as well. I think there are two really interesting distinctions, and I think it's really interesting when you can find filmmakers that have managed to exist in both realms and have kind of gone back and forward. But they're hard to find.
Leo, how do you feel about cinema and video art?
I think there definitely are some filmmakers who will fit very specifically into each category, but I think it's almost impossible to actually find a definitive line between the two, because so many people have crossed the boundary between the two, that I don't think there's really, you can find a distinction necessarily. But obviously with cinema there is a lot more commercial stuff which maybe wouldn't fit so much into the video art. But if you actually look at it with a sort of in a view of the artistic side of the production or the cinematography or whatever, you actually see so many overlaps between video art and cinema. So I don't think you could really ever find a definition between the two.
Yeah, same, I agree. It's kind of it's kind of hard to define the line as well. And you've just made me think also something that I've been thinking about at the moment is the distinction between installation and video art. When a film gets installed, then depending on how it's installed, then it could become an installation, and all these kind of things. I also wanted to add to the question that does anybody want to direct a longer film, an actual a feature film, a long film? So should we go on to Lucy?
Yeah, I mean, with directing and stuff, that's kind of, since graduating, the kind of direction I want to go into, and I'm trying to find work now as an actual camera person, which is very hard to do when you don't have a film degree. I found out. Yeah, I think the distinctions between cinema and video art is just more to do with what you as the creator say it is. As I know people who've done a documentary film as an artist, and I know people who have then just done a very artistic film, but it is still a film in a cinema release way. And yeah, and even in art galleries, you can have this at a screening where you do have to sit down from beginning to end. But yeah, and then you can play around with then the conventions within that. And I know a lot of artists who have done that, and that's a really interesting point to explore. I did that with one of my earlier pieces where I just did a single shot that was 30 seconds long and stretched it out so it was 40 minutes long. And then put that was in my degree show, put that in a space, and it was really interesting to see how people reacted to that and whether they would understand that it was a moving image, or if they would just see it on a TV monitor and then walk out again.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way of looking at it as well, because I guess as a film artist you get to decide, a video and film artist gets to decide how long the viewer stays with the piece, and obviously with most films it's 2 hours long or something like that. Yeah, so I think that artists have got a lot to feed into cinema as well. So what do you think about it, Maddie?
When I looked at the question, I kind of thought yeah, they are definitely kind of completely different. But then I mean, listening to all of your answers, it's made me realize how I would define them as with how they're different would be that video art is more maybe experimental and that sort of thing. And then I was thinking about it, of course not. I've watched so many films that are cinematic films that are just completely experimental and strange and whatever, just kind of a very long, I think you're right, the duration and how long someone sits in a cinema, watches the film, maybe is kind of a big difference between the two of them. But I've seen a lot of, I think they overlap so much because I've seen so much cinema that I would kind of call art, call video art basically. I don't really know kind of where the different, I don't exactly know where the overlap kind of would end basically. Yeah, but it's interesting hearing all your answers, because I kind of thought I had one opinion at the start and it's kind of changed it a little bit. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Archie, what do you think about cinema and video art?
So it's a good question, Alan, and I find it hard. Bill Viola said something along the lines of every video artist will be influenced by every video they see and every film they see. But I think it's also just as important that all the viewers will be influenced in any video they watch by any video they've seen or how they view screens or view this kind of medium. I think habitually we kind of view video art on a screen and we kind of watch it and you take it in, you maybe stay for the duration. And in that kind of art space, you do have those kind of drifting in and out of people. And there was this piece at the Biennale by Stan Douglas called Doppelganger, and it didn't have a start and an end. It was just a collection of scenes that kind of ran alongside each other, and you could join it at any time and leave it at any time. You'd kind of get the same experience, but where you started would be the start of your narrative. So everyone's start was different, even though there wasn't one, but everyone had their own perception on a start. I think those kind of things are interesting, and especially when talking about duration. Like that piece I did, Durations, is a 2.5 hour piece, probably the length of like a feature film, but it's just people sat there, and I troubled a lot with how I would present that. Do you present the whole 2.5 hours? People see 10 minutes of it, they only get a small snippet of what the whole film is, or do you have like a restart button? Can people come in and restart your video so that they see it from the start? And I think that's one of the things I struggle with as a video artist, is presenting my work in that way, trying to get what I want the viewer to see for the viewer to see. And that's not always easy to do in an exhibition environment. And I think that's what would have been a good about aspect, because we've been able to try a lot of these fun things. But yeah, I think there is a big difference, but there is a lot of overlap. And with the directing thing, I don't know if my work is very anti-narrative, and I don't think that's on purpose. It's just kind of what it's become. It's kind of experiments or participatory things, I guess, for lack of a better word than things. But yeah, so yeah.
Actually, that's kind of reminded me of I can't remember where it was. It was in the I think it was in the Henry Moore. No, it wasn't. It was one of the Leeds galleries. They had an exhibition, and one of the films in the exhibition was it was a short film where they had 3 different characters, I think talking about stealing a car or something, and so there were 3 like really distinct characters, all kind of dressed in like very differently. And as the film went round, I think at certain points it all stopped and all the characters swapped roles and costumes. So they would all they were like 2 men and 1 kind of like non-binary person, I think, and they were all like, or like, oh, I think, yeah, there was a woman, a man, someone else, and they were all kind of like dressed differently. So whenever you walked in, you got like kind of one view, and each of the characters were different. And then if you came in 10 minutes later, it'd be a completely different film with like all of the characters playing different roles. It was a really interesting way of like kind of like what you're saying about duration, like how you see a film differently when like according to kind of like this time you come in and watch it.
Yeah, and I think as well, the way that you can view a film in an exhibition, like I went to I can't remember the piece, but there was 2 screens placed on top of each other like a tent, and you had to lie underneath them to actually see what was going on, and it completely changes how you would, view a film. You're stood there, or in the cinema, you're sat there in a dark room and it's very you and the screen. But when you have to interact with the screen and weave around it, or I recently did a piece called Not Plinth, where there was a screen inside a plinth and the plinth had a lid. Yeah, it's just crazy stuff like that I think is well interesting. We've lost someone. We've lost Leo.
Oh, we lost Leo.
I'll try and
Will she be able to join again?
Yeah, I'm sure she will.
Okay.
I think
yeah,
we shared the link then.
I think she's on the way back. I was just going to say that I think narrative could probably be like quite a significant part about cinema and video art as well. I think that could be like quite a big part of how they are kind of viewed differently. And I liked what you were saying about the film that you were describing, Maddie, because it's kind of like taking those things that you take for granted about a normal film, like characters and like what makes a character, like costume and things like that, and then taking that and just turning it into something different. And just, yeah, so I think that's really interesting. Is Leo coming back?
I've shot her a message, not sure.
Okay, we'll see if she comes back, but we'll just go to the next question because it kind of ties into what you were saying about presentation, Archie. So the next question is, what modes of presentation do you use? Traditional, more experimental? So this is like really relevant to our exhibition because we really wanted to like really push the different ways that we wanted to curate it. And we had like so many different ideas that are still hopefully going to go ahead for like how the work is going to be viewed. I'm really determined. So should we begin with Archie, because I know that he's got a lot of crazy ways.
Yes, I try and think of ways in which my work is different to how you usually view a video piece. So I'm really trying to look at the materiality of video, how you can use a video and how you can play that into how your audience perceives the video. So most of my videos aren't pre-recorded things. They're not things I've made. They're just live reproductions of the space-time that the observer is living in. So for example, a collection of screens on the ground, whereas when you look on them, you multiply onto all these screens and it changes the dynamic of the space-time that the observer's existing in. And all of those kind of ideas where you're thinking about screens in new ways, or you're hanging things from the ceiling and you've got a live feed of the other thing from behind them. And it's just these ways of playing with the space and playing with, how we habitually view video, which I think is hopefully going to be super fun when we finally do Aspect after all of this.
Maddie, for your film, you were using really experimental ways of having the viewer almost become part of the film. So yeah, what do you think about the presentation of the film? Hey, Leo.
Hi, sorry.
Yeah, no, as I said earlier, I mean, it's kind of the first time that I have done something like that and have done an installation with video. I mean, I've done kind of what I guess would be installation pieces before, but they weren't very kind of thought through. They were like, I mean, this is kind of something I put a lot more thought and planning into. And I just wanted, I think in the past, my videos have just been so non-interactive. They've just been something on a screen. And I've seen so many artists, and especially like a lot of your work, like all of the work that I've seen from like you guys, a lot of it's kind of like on kind of multiple screens, like more kind of experimental in the way it's set out, and so much more interactive who are like the viewer, because they're almost a part of it. So I wanted to like kind of incorporate that kind of idea into my piece, and I'm kind of like, I'm pretty happy with the kind of how it worked out, seeing it's something I haven't really done before. I guess don't want to like give too much away on what I'm actually doing. But yeah, no, I'm actually really excited to see how it is. I mean, I've tested out like how it would be in the actual like exhibition, and I think hopefully it'll be really interesting to actually like see it work and see how people actually interact with it, and then kind of go from there, and how if I want to keep doing installation pieces or not.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see like how people interact with it as well. I think it's really interesting to use like props and people and try and get people involved like that. And I think that's like one of the reasons why we picked yours to be part of the exhibition, because it was just kind of, especially because you hadn't done anything like that before. So yeah, I think it's really great. So Lucy, how do you feel that you use presentation within your video art?
I tend to use a lot of different screens, but yeah, recently I've just been kind of just doing the single monitor. I played around with the past with having like a set space and having it be more like an installation, and that's where it's like very important for the viewer to interact with things. But yeah, going more into like just having graduated and having basically no equipment, you kind of just work with what you have, and that at the minute just been single monitors and having it be more like a cinema style screening. Yeah.
Yeah, and Alan, how do you go about presenting your work as well?
I'm not really entirely sure, because like kind of being a part of this exhibition was one of the very rare times when I've actually got around to exhibiting my work. Like I think one of the biggest weaknesses of my practice is like I don't have the drive to share my work. it sounds really bad, but I just don't really like. I enjoy like the making and the creating and the recording, and I just don't have much behind me when it comes to sharing it really. But I've always lent more towards the more experimental ways of using multiple screens. I think if I only ever use one screen, I would always feel sort of like it just wasn't enough, I guess. So it'd be like at least multiple screens where they're different types of media, something like that. But I've never really been drawn towards projection. It's just something about projecting I just don't like. I don't know why.
Leo, how do you feel about presenting your work and how you presented it? Because you proposed a really interesting piece that is like an installation for our Aspect exhibition, which I'm really excited about. So yeah.
So with all my work, they're all the film part is just an aspect of the installation, because I try and make sort of these uncomfortable environments for the audience to experience, and I always say like the final piece of work is actually the experience of that the audience goes through rather than the film itself or whatever I'm presenting. So I definitely always want them to be viewed within the installation, because if the film or sound piece, whatever it is removed from the installation, it becomes only like a fraction of what the final piece was, and often the interpretation of it can be completely different, or just completely misinterpreted, or not experienced how I intended it. So normally I create sort of generally quite isolated viewing environments, like only one or two people, normally quite small and intimate, because like it helps with the uncomfortability of viewing it. But I generally steer away from just the standard monitor, like single screen viewing.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. Like I kind of use like a lot of screens. At the moment I'm kind of wanting to do like dark room projections, so that things are kind of floating in spaces and things like that. I think like for me my work really kind of does come alive when I do present it, so that's really important to me. Like I guess like unlike Alan, where it's more of like a reluctance to show the work, like I feel that my work really needs to be in an environment where it can be seen, to get like an overall picture from it. So the next question is advice for somebody starting out in filmmaking, which I thought was really a nice question, because everybody's got to start somewhere. So Archie, do you want to start?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I kind of fell into filmmaking. I didn't really, initiate or do anything. I was kind of thinking of ideas. And I think it's good when you're thinking of ideas to not restrict yourself to a medium, to think of a concept, think of it and go, how can I best explain this? How can I best get this across? And for me at that time, it was video, and I was trying to look at time-based things, and explore sound and movement and motion. And a lot of those things can be explored really well in video. And then it just kind of snowballed for me personally. But I'd say if everyone's got a phone, if you ever want to start into filmmaking, just film what you think is interesting, film what inspires you, or visually, because that's what videoing is. It's like a visual thing, isn't it? So anything that you visually is stimulating to you, film that, get on that. I think that's how I'd start.
Yeah, I think it's like also really, for me, when I first started, I was just kind of like, oh, I don't know how to do it. But obviously if you don't like just do it, then you're never going to do it. And I think like for me a lot as an artist, it's kind of like a fear of doing it and then it not being good. But I would just say to like any filmmaker to just go ahead and do it, because I think like as an artist I feel that I've got like an interesting perspective to take with film, and that's why I'm so interested in structural film, because I think that like wherever direction you come from, like however like what you view as, you've got something interesting to show. So yeah, Maddie, what would you say to somebody who is starting out?
I feel like I'm starting out in filmmaking, but I think the one thing that they said to me in uni was that you should be like kind of, well, not you should, but like it's a good idea to be keeping up like a stock of footage, and I mean that's why I find it really helpful to have my camcorder like out a lot, because I just film a lot of stuff, no matter how kind of stupid it is, or if it's just boring, or like just something kind of like funny I see or whatever, it's really fun to go back when you're making film and have like a ton of footage that you can just kind of stick in there and like use again, or just completely manipulate into something different or whatever. Like, also, I just think when I started, I went straight into being kind of weird and experimental with it, and it was like just really fun, because I look back at them now and I'm like, they're not great, but also they're just like so much fun to make that they definitely kind of helped me like develop my ideas from there, because I just was just kind of like not afraid to be a bit like weird with it.
Yeah, I definitely think like, I think that's how like a lot of people start out, just like kind of filming like whatever, and I think it's a really nice way to start as well, because it's kind of like your little like archive of stuff that you can just get out whenever you want. Like it's like a painter's paint kind of thing. Like, yeah, I like that idea of collecting the videos. So Lucy, how do you feel about starting film and how you would start it?
Yeah, I think just getting out and doing it and not kind of making excuses up like, oh, if I had better equipment or if I knew how to do this, and not to get too focused on the technical side. Like, YouTube is your best friend. You can like learn to do anything on there, and even sometimes you don't need to learn a lot of things. I mean, if you're like planning to do it, you know, in the kind of like you know, stereotypical way of like where the white balance is good, the colors almost nice, then you need to learn a bit about that. But as an artist, you can play around with that and use that to your advantage. Yeah, just keep going, and I'll back everything up. I've had too many hard drives break. Let's just back everything up a million times. Yes, have multiple hard drives, Google Drive it, everything. Please learn from my mistakes. Back everything up.
Yeah, I also like have lost things as well, like on the hard drive. I feel like that's probably, I don't know if this is a question, like strengths and weaknesses of the medium, but like it definitely is a weakness. Like I lost my mind, like losing my footage. So like, yeah, that's a big one. Make sure that you back everything up. Also like what you mentioned about like not knowing how to do something, like it's almost like, do you not feel like as an artist, like if you make a mistake, then you can just like, it's a happy mistake, like you can just use it. So I just feel like as an artist, we just have like this like rite of passage to just make anything into whatever you want it to be. So I feel like that's a really nice thing about it, but also maybe sometimes people would say that that's a bit like a cop out, I don't know. But
I think it's good because you can kind of learn a software, you can kind of not learn a software in a way. Like I really don't know how to use Premiere Pro effectively. I kind of just know what to do, what I need it for, and you kind of make those little things where you're probably not doing it the correct way, but it's an interesting way and it's a fun way to do it, and you're learning your own little craft, and things will go wrong that may look awesome, that may like really, you know, you might not mean to do it, you might not know how you did it afterwards, but it really adds to it. And I'd also say, I know Premiere Pro is like a great resource, and if you are starting a video artist out, I would say torrent that up because it's expensive and we're all poor artists. I think you have the liberty to, innit?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think the first thing you make is always going to be, you're always going to think is rubbish anyway, so it's just better to just go out and do it. And sometimes you even look back at the stuff you made ages ago and think like, oh, that's what I was trying to say with that, like that's actually quite good, and you kind of like think like, oh, why was I so obsessed with getting this perfectly right? So yeah.
The first thing I made on Premiere The first thing I made on Premiere Pro, I think I added so many effects, it took literally like 15 hours to render, and I just had to let it go. I was like, no, it's not happening.
Yeah, does anybody use anything else other than Premiere Pro, like just out of curiosity? Because that's all I use as well, and I'm kind of still like getting to grips with it. I mean, I'm okay at it. Does anyone use anything else?
Only Blender. I know you use that as well, Beth, but that's not really for video editing. You know, that's the kind of 3D modeling, but you can export videos from that and do that kind of thing. But now, other than that, Premiere Pro is what I use. So
Premiere Pro to the starting out filmmakers that may or may not be watching this. Alan, how do you what would you say to people starting out in film?
I think I would kind of echo what Lucy said. Like, just try not and get kind of put off by all the techie kind of side of it. You know, using cameras can be really, really complicated, and editing, especially Premiere Pro, is it's a mess to use. It's really, really difficult. And I mean, I still barely know how to use my camera, and somehow I get by. So I'm pretty sure anybody could.
I feel like we're all being like really harsh on ourselves, being like, yeah, I've no idea what I'm doing, by the way, and we're just like trying to put together this exhibition, but oh well, we've exposed ourselves. Leo, how do you feel about starting out in filmmaking?
I was literally going to say the exact same, just like don't be afraid to blunder your way through it, pretty much. I had like no intention of going down the route of film, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I've just winged it this whole time. But also in the same vein, like, do ask for help if you feel like you need to, because there are so many people who do like have some kind of knowledge in whether it's in the cameras or it's in the editing side of it. There are so many people who do know things about filmmaking, so I think there's value to working it out yourself, because you kind of learn regardless if it goes right or not, but also ask for help if you need it.
Yeah, like I think I'd have to agree with that. Like I get told all the time that I should show people that maybe don't necessarily involve themselves in art to see what they think of my film. So I think that's another piece of advice I'd give to people, is to make sure that it gets to a wider audience so that you can like see what the perspective is on it. Any more thoughts on that question for anyone? Or no? So the next question is future directions, which is a horrible question. And I don't know if it was me that put the question, but if it was, then I'm really sorry for anyone that's a third year anyway. I'm not going to start. Who's going to start?
I don't mind starting. So future directions is kind of tough now that we're in, lockdown, and that nothing's happening. So usually, I'd say do your degree show, graduate, start off as an artist, but it doesn't look like any of that's going to happen. So I guess in this time, we can kind of just do things like this and try and stay connected with other artists. I think that's really important. Loads of the artists I've been speaking to over the last couple of weeks are finding it really hard just not chatting to other artists and not being able to, express ideas or formulate plans, or just all of that great stuff you get from uni or hanging out with other artist friends of you, or just anything. I think that's important for the now. For the future directions, for where everything will lead after this, I guess it depends where the world is, and what we're kind of at there. Yeah, who knows? I mean, it's a good idea to keep at your work, isn't it? And as a video artist, it's tough to maintain an income from that. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of video artists struggle with early on. It's kind of, you can't sell a piece of video easily. I mean, I'm sure you probably could. It's kind of just putting yourself out there, especially as a video artist, putting on exhibitions, doing things like this, and meeting other people in the same craft as you, because then you just, you're not this lonesome poor video maker. You're a group of lonesome poor video makers. So, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely like agree with having like a network. It's so much better to have a network, and I'm so grateful to have one. Yeah, like I think that's the main thing, because the other people will keep you going with everything. Personally, I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to be doing with my future, so like literally no idea at all, but like I'm embracing that. I don't really care. So does anybody else like have a specific career plan or anything that we can?
I mean, like since like graduating, I feel like old. Let's say like I have all my new advice for after graduation. But yeah, it's a bit difficult like once you're like kind of thrown out there, especially since like a lot of my like network of friends like moved all over the country now. But I think one of the main things I've been trying to do is, if you can't find an opportunity, make it. So I've been doing that with my friends. We started our own like arts event company, We Belong Here. I know Beth, you were involved in one of them. We're doing an e-residency at the minute, which is still, applications are still open. We've extended the deadline till the 24th now, just like that's going to be an online one, coping with the fact that, you know, we're all in lockdown and we can't actually go outside and make things. Yeah, it gets difficult with like juggling a job, like paying rent. That's fun, and bills. But yeah, I think just keeping brushing up on your writing. That's really good for like applications for residencies and exhibitions and proposals. But yeah, just making whatever kind of opportunities you can, and kind of accept that you're probably not going to be making money from this for a long time. Yeah, that's kind of my future directions. And then eventually, you know, everyone's always going to be hoping there's going to be this magical breakthrough moment when you're a successful artist. But yeah, we'll see what happens.
Maddie, how do you feel about like the future directions for like your filmmaking? Because I know you're still a first year, aren't you? And you're going into your second year, so how do you feel like you're going to continue with your practice? Do you think it might change drastically, or?
Yeah, I actually feel pretty positive about it at the moment, because I think I've just gone through so many mediums that this is something I feel really happy with. And none of the films I've made are like brilliant, but every one of them kind of gets better, and that's something that is kind of pretty positive to me. Or like I can kind of see it that I'm improving. Like it just feels like it's something that I would really like to stick with. Obviously I don't know like at all what I'm going to do in the future, but in terms of kind of like next year and second year, hopefully by September things will be kind of like relatively kind of back to normal-ish. So hopefully we'll be back in uni again, and yeah, I can actually kind of like go with ideas to tutors and other people and just kind of like talk through them a bit more, which is something that would like, well, that kind of really helps me. So yeah, I mean, I think I definitely want to stick with filmmaking. Like I was saying before, like the sort of installation type stuff is something that interests me quite a lot. And I did some work recently that was like it was kind of like 2 monitors. I think I sent the video of it to Archie, but it was like 2 monitors playing like 2 quite similar videos with like there's like spoken word and text over it. So yeah, I think kind of stuff like that I was looking to do more of in the future as well. Yeah, that kind of thing.
Alan, where do you think that you're headed with the future, if you know?
I think I'm kind of in the minority in the fact that I don't plan on becoming an artist as a career. I've applied for an MA at Goldsmiths in Film and Screen Studies with the 3rd year, so I'll be going back home and working for a year, hopefully get accepted, and then become poor in London, because my bank will just go empty within a matter of weeks probably. And then after that I want to, I don't know, write or teach or program film, something like that.
That sounds really cool and very technical. Leo, how do you feel about the future?
I'm the same as you. I don't really have any plan, I guess. Also, particularly in this climate, God knows what's going to happen. But really, I'm, as much as I would like to become a practicing artist, I am also like not opposed to finding the art in more commercial jobs. Because there's so many jobs that like involve filming and editing and all that kind of thing, and I really enjoy editing. Like it's probably my favorite part of the entire process. So honestly, I wouldn't mind just staying in an editing suite as my actual job. Maybe not ideal, but yeah, I'll take what comes.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a situation of like trying to obviously earn enough money, but also try and keep what you're doing. I think like nobody can really know how realistic that is until you're kind of out there doing it. So I think like as long as you keep like a close network, like you should like be able, like no matter how much like you're doing every week, like just kind of try and keep it ticking over. Like I've wanted to like work in galleries before and things like that, I think like my main thing is just making sure that obviously the practice doesn't die out, which I don't think is going to happen, but like I think that's really important to like not get too caught up with like real life kind of thing. So I'm not going to do the next question because I feel like it's not with the flow of what we're talking about. So I'll just go on to the next question, which is strengths and weaknesses as a filmmaker. So you have to be really honest with yourself. So I'll go first. Strengths and weaknesses. I think my weakness is that like I absolutely hate watching back my films, and like I'm really, really harsh on myself with things. And like I think like obviously the most important thing is watching back your film so that you can like see where you've gone wrong and everything. Like I was in a meeting and I just like had to leave the room because I just couldn't like deal with other people viewing my film, like having something that's mine be showed to so many people, which is a bit silly because like obviously as artists your work gets viewed and you have to get over it. But I think that's like one of my biggest weaknesses is that I just don't like it. Yeah, like I do it, but it's hard. So yeah, what is your weakness, Archie?
I think all my work is like, it gets to a point where it's like 80% finished and then I just stop working on it. I'm kind of, all my work doesn't look that polished or look that well finished. I kind of have the idea, get really excited about it for ages, and when there's that last little bit, you know, that last little bit you have to finish, I'm just like, oh, I'll just do something else. So all my pieces are kind of 80% done, and I wish I could just put in that extra 20% effort, but I just get a new idea and I'm like, oh yeah, it's almost done, I'll finish it sometime. It just never gets finished and it's just always half done. And I've been doing that for 3 years and I kind of just think I'm going to carry on doing it. So yeah, that's it. That's my main weakness.
And what about strengths as well? Because I forgot to ask.
Yeah. Persistence, maybe. If I've got an idea, I try and make it happen until I obviously get to like 80% of it. But yeah, persistence, thought outness. So that's not a word, but you know, where you think of every parameter that could go wrong before you start filming something, or you really like when you're for instance filming a piece, you want to think about every aspect of it. So say if you've got a screen on a wall and you've got all the wires, you could do interesting things, you know, you create a spider web of wires coming around that. And I think I'm good at looking at little things that you can make a bit more interesting, you know, playing with your screens a bit more, just jazzing it up a little bit. I quite like that kind of side of art. You're just slowly finically changing things.
Cool. Yeah. So I'll do weaknesses and then we have to do strengths as well because I feel like we're being really horribly harsh on ourselves. It's taken such a turn. Maddie, what would you say that your weakness and then strength is?
Well, I was actually going to kind of do it the other way because I feel like strengths. I think with like one of my strengths is that I have some really well thought through concepts. Like I always think I'm quite good at getting kind of like an idea. I have like quite strong ideas. I'm really kind of not obsessive. I don't know what the right word would be. Like I kind of really want to get on and do it. But then really similar to Archie, I feel like I get to a point in my film where if I'm unhappy with it, I'll kind of just give up a bit and I'll be like, well, like if I do it and I do it well, then I'll be like just like really proud of myself and actually will be quite happy with it. But then there are just quite a few films that I've started, I've thought I've had a really good concept, and then as soon as I've kind of got to a point where I'm slightly unhappy with it, instead of fixing it, I'm just kind of like, oh well, you know, like I might as well just kind of give up now. But yeah, I think my my strength is definitely like the kind of concepts and kind of like ideas behind my work. So I'll end on that because it's nicer.
Lucy, what would you say like your strengths and weaknesses are?
I think my strength kind of lies in yeah, I'd say my like technical side. I think I've gotten really good at editing. I'm really good at actually knowing what a camera does now. Weaknesses, I would say I find it really hard to get an idea from my head onto like the actual screen. So it kind of ties in, but like, yeah, I know how to use this camera, but can I use it the way that I want to show something? And then also procrastination, because I will think about things for ages and I'll be like, yeah, that's a really good idea. And then I just don't do them for ages because I'm like, oh, what if it goes wrong? What if this happens? So, which is kind of weird because all my advice before was like, just do it. So I guess I should follow my own advice sometimes. Yeah.
Alan, what would you say like your weaknesses and strengths are?
I'd probably say my strength is kind of similar to Archie in the fact of like kind of persistence. Like when I get really interested in something, then I'll be really passionate about it and I'll kind of stick to it for the most part, and I'll really want to kind of see it through. But I think my weakness is probably that I just overplan. Like I overplan to a point where then it's in question about whether I'll actually get through to doing it really. And you know, if you overplan too much, then you just get too anxious about it and you just never get it done.
Leo, what would you say like your strengths and weaknesses are?
I say as a strength, I definitely like I think everything through. Like before I do it, I'm very methodical and like about sort of every element of the piece, like the installation and the filming, done all the research. Like I've made sure I've like really thought everything through before I even like start out a concept. But I guess as a weakness, like when I actually finished it, I get like kind of like you said, I get kind of a bit embarrassed to show anyone, almost I guess because I put so much thought into it and effort into it, then I just get a little bit like nervous, which is very stupid because my whole thing is about like installation. You've got to experience it, and if I can't show it to anyone, it doesn't work at all. But yeah, I think I get too like worried that they're not going to get it, or that it just isn't going to work as well as I had hoped it did. But yeah, I guess I just also sometimes my like concepts end up being almost too elaborate. Like they're not impossible to make, but for someone with like limited funds and like limited space and stuff, and just as myself, I can't actually end up like fully achieving what I intended to with the from the start.
Do you guys worry as conceptual artists that, you know, we think about our meaning and what we're trying to convey within the work? Do you ever think that sometimes becomes too much and then the work itself is like ununderstandable, like the audience won't get what's going on because you've just kind of delved too deep in the philosophy of it? Or do you ever like overcomplicate your work? Because I find myself doing that a lot. I put a lot of things into my work, I think about a lot of stuff, and someone will watch it and just have no idea what it's about or have like any clue. Do you guys have that same issue or struggle with that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think I definitely do. That was actually, I wrote that down as like an extra question because I was thinking about concept versus practice. I think one of my other weaknesses would be that like I do pour a lot into the research side of it, and like I think it's all about what you tell the viewer as well, and like what they need to know. Sometimes they don't need to know everything, and sometimes they need a little bit of background information. I think that's really important. So it's not even just about what you've actually made, it's about the little bio with it and what you want to say about it. And yeah, like, I think it's hard to gauge, especially like when you're writing about your work, like how much you reveal to the viewer. Yeah, I think that's definitely like a thing. Like I think it's difficult to gauge. Yeah. Maddie, what do you think about concept and things?
Well, like I said, like a lot of my stuff, I think that's what I'm quite good at, but then that's completely true, Archie, that you have your concept down. I come up with these like kind of weird ideas, or I'll like wake up in the middle of the night or just have this weird idea and be like, yes, it's brilliant, like write it all down, and then you try and work it through and you're like, I'm the only one who understands this, and it just looks so stupid. Like when you're putting it into like you're putting it on camera, or like it looks interesting, but it's just not at all what you meant to do, and you're just kind of like, it's just like a bit frustrating because you have this whole thing in your head, but it's just kind of in your head. You don't really have to form it into like exact words or kind of like a complete thought or anything. So like I have kind of these concepts I just can't express in kind of reality, and it just it's like kind of frustrating. But yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. It's like a big problem with like how I work as well.
Like I think especially when you're doing a degree as well and you have to like describe like why you're doing your work, it's like a balance between trying to like maintain the fun of it and like working intuitively and also like engaging with research. And I think like one of the things that I know a lot of people tend to do is just like over research and things, and then it kind of loses that intuitive process. So I guess like the only thing that I think like more recently I've been working more intuitively, but then just trying to like harp it back to like what I'm trying to do and trying to get that balance. But I think it's also quite like freeing to work that way as well, because at the end of the day, like we've all built up a practice, and like I would like to think that whatever I have made, because I have made it, is special in a way, like whether it says what I like wanted it to say or not. Like I think it's nice to look at it that way, rather than like I plan to do this, I've researched this and this and this and this, like, because it just kind of sometimes takes away like that like purity of like the film maybe. Lucy, have you got any thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. Like it's really hard to get ideas down, like especially into words. I know I've definitely sounded like a crazy person multiple times when trying to explain something. Yeah, definitely like what Maddie was saying, getting really fixed on these like concepts that, yeah, definitely experienced waking up in the middle of the night, God, this is amazing, this is brilliant. Waking up and then finding like my notebook is just like I think one time I literally wrote film is real ? And that was it. And I woke up and I was like, what am I trying to say? What is this? Like half
I've
the
done
time
the
I
exact
don't
same
even
thing.
understand. Yeah, and it's interesting to, you know, art is a visual language, like so it's really hard to then present something in a visual way and then having to like kind of translate it back into spoken word or written word. And it's hard, and I hate doing it, but I also hate it when viewers don't get what I want them to get. No, I really don't like the death of the author concept. I'm like, no, this is what I say it is, but also I can't explain it. So yeah, it's a very complicated relationship, I think.
I think Alan is someone that I always think of when I think about theory, because I know that his work is quite theory based. So I'm interested to know what you've got to say.
I think I'm finding it especially difficult at the moment because due to our conditions, I've kind of just retreated into reading even more. So now I'm just stuck with way too much theory, too much concepts, and I'm like trying to make them into this video, and I'm just finding myself kind of stalling on it because I'm just getting bogged down by thinking, you know, will people understand this or not? But I think there's something quite freeing about the whole death of the author kind of thing. I think it's advisable to try and distance yourself from that. Being able to try and just think, you know what, this is something I make, it goes out, and it will be interpreted however it's interpreted. And trying to accept that there's nothing you can do about it, I think it's something freeing, but I think it's very difficult to do, and I don't think I'm anywhere near it yet.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. That I remember like when you said that you were going to like delve into a lot of reading, and I think that's something that I used to do a lot, and it can kind of like take over the practice sometimes. But yeah, I hope that you're still getting out filming and doing stuff as well. Leo, how do you feel about like theory and practice?
Well, for a lot of my like films stuff, the initial concepts like themselves aren't actually that like theoretical or that complicated. It's then once I come up with a pretty simple concept, then it's the research I do into trying to convey that in absolutely every way possible is like, because I guess because like Lucy was saying, I want the audience to like understand it was what I meant it to be. So I try to like cover every basis that they get the meaning from it. But also, I guess on the other hand, because my work is all about the experience, I have had to let go of that quite a lot. That luckily people generally get like the lines of where I'm going with things, but it is up to their interpretation. And even if they like it's wildly misinterpreted, they still took it as something. So I guess just like they experienced something watching it, so gotta be okay with that, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's like the whole thing of like putting your artwork out into the world, and I think like anybody that does that is really brave. So yeah. Next question is your favourite filmmaker. Archie, favourite filmmaker?
Is this just favourite video artist? At the moment, I'm really enjoying Pierre Hugh. He did that exhibition Umwelt not long ago, where he was trying to mix biological and like human and technological. He did like an MRI scan of someone's brain and then got the technology to recreate those images, and then that was on a big screen. Within this exhibition, he'd also released a load of blue bottle flies that were having their own kind of life cycle. So they were kind of this life cycle of flies with living within this life cycle of a temporary exhibition, and all of that overlapping of different time and different instances and technological and the biological. Yeah, really enjoying his work at the moment.
Cool. Maddie? Any artists?
Yeah. Well, I kind of had like two when I was trying to think of some. I don't know if they're maybe like my favorite of all time. It's kind of hard to pick someone specifically, but I listened a lot of Pippa Lottie-Rist before uni ended, and I think a lot of my work was inspired by like her use of color. She has like a lot of joy in all her installation work. Like it's all just really beautiful. She does these kind of I think projections on walls of rooms, but they're just like covered with kind of this like sort of seascape or like flowers or something, and they just turn into like completely like another world. And yeah, like a lot of her work is really interesting, her videos, and she just seems like a really interesting person. But then there's, I think, one video I watched a while ago which was called Tallow, I think it was I can't remember it. Wait, I searched her name. Her name was like Ida Lisa Tiller, and it was this short, well, it was like this video piece about a woman who was kind of losing her grip on reality, and it was like shown on 3 screens. I only saw a video of it rather than the actual thing. It was shown on like 3 separate screens. Each of them were kind of like a different part of this sort of story, and it was her walking through her house, and as she'd walk into one room, another screen would be kind of like her living room, but it would be like the noises of the fridge would be coming from like a different room. So it kind of seemed like as you were standing there watching all 3 screens, they were kind of getting more and more kind of distorted, and her whole like grip on reality, you could see it like through her eyes, and it was just really interesting. Yeah, I think that's just like a piece that really stood out to me from a while ago. I'm not sure I described it very well, but yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, you'll have to put a name like in the chat bit so that we can see like who's everybody is, because I don't think I know how to spell that. And Lucy, your favorite artist or filmmaker or anything?
I guess at the minute, I love Elizabeth Price. The Wolfworth Choir changed my life. It was amazing. I've seen it like in 3 different art galleries now. But also Joe Ramirez. I saw him in Berlin. He did an event called the Golden Projections, where he took over one of the concert halls in Berlin, and played these 2 like completely silent films, and it went from like sunset till 1 a.m. and it was just alternating projections on these 2 like massive golden discs that like played really slow like painterly images, and you like everyone like sat on the floor and had like sleeping bags and things like that. So yeah, he at the minute I love his work. Yeah.
Alan, your favorite film artist?
There's just too many, but I think I've always really liked the American filmmaker James Benning. I remember finding his work years ago, and he was like the first filmmaker I found where it was someone who could film a landscape for like half an hour, and that was okay. And like up to that point, I'd never seen something like that before, and it kind of really fascinated me. But I think more recently, the work I'm doing right now, I'm kind of really obsessed with Haroon Faraki, and I really love the idea of kind of like essay cinema. And it's really annoying because him and Hito Steele had like a exhibition down in London that I was going to go to, and it was literally like I was going to go like 2 days before lockdown probably went in, so I just had to put out of that one.
I was actually James Benning was on my list of like artists as well. Actually, I watched is it Landscape Suicides? Yeah. Yeah, I watched that the other day, and it was like just like a completely different film to what I'd like seen before. It's like amazing. It was so good.
Leah, your favorite film artist?
I guess one of my sort of old favorites was, well, still is, Chris Wellesby, because the way he actually goes about filming things, it's very, he does a lot of landscape like films actually, but he lets the environment kind of work with his camera, and it's actually a really interesting method of filming. But currently one of my favorites is definitely Mariana Sim. I actually found her for one of her like sound and light pieces, but she does a lot of really uncomfortable films as well, and I just think they're incredible. Like, they're kind of horrible, but I love them.
I'm really excited to look at all these film artists, so please make sure that you put them in the chat so that I can see them. I think my favourite filmmakers are Daria Martin, Elizabeth Price, just the obvious ones, like the boring ones. But like, but also like I do think it's important about like what you kind of like consume as well, because I know that I was looking at a lot of structural film artists like Michael Snow, and like there's nothing wrong with that at all, but like I think that like then it was kind of like, where am I coming from and where do I situate myself? Like obviously like with structural film there's a lot of like just like American men that are making these films, so I think it's like important to like see a range of different films from different like backgrounds and things like that. So yeah, so the next bit is like more about like how we've all been working at home. Has it altered our practice? Has it altered ideas within the practice? So yeah, like with COVID-19, we've all have been having to work from home, and like we've all been kind of trying to work ways around it. Like we've had different like deadlines, extensions, things like that. So yeah, like how has everybody found it? Should we start with Archie?
Yeah, so it's been weird because obviously you doing anything remotely connected to uni work just seems super futile because we don't have like a degree show. It's kind of just we hand in a digital portfolio, which is what we did last year, and then a little bit over doing that whole thing. So uni work I really don't enjoy doing because it doesn't seem like doing any work. And then my own practice, that I guess is the same as my uni practice, just seems to have stagnated. So the day before uni broke up, I collected all my equipment at uni and put it all in one place, ready to take home the next day. And then the next day we're in isolation, so all my equipment is still at uni, which is just devastating. So I've mostly just been trying to read. I'm reading this really interesting book called Boredom and Art, which I'd recommend to anyone who's bored and an artist, or just bored. Like, it's just really fascinating. And just, I think I'm trying to do more funny things, you know. I'm trying to make art that's making light of this time. So I've done a few time lapses where I replaced the sky with just montages of people making cups of tea that people have sent me, to just trying to, because you know that's the most mundane thing I do as a British person, is I just drink tons of tea, and just like little things like that, just trying to, you know, keep you going, but it's difficult. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, like, I think it's like kind of frustrating having to be online in a way for me. Like I've found it a little bit like, oh, but I like want to do the real thing because I'm like, I just want to, but obviously we have to like work with what we've got, kind of thing. I think like, yeah, like a big thing for me was just like not being able to speak to people and like things like that, because I think like it's just really important having people around you and stuff. So yeah, Maddie, how have you found working at home?
Well, I had like a chat with my tutor earlier, and it kind of made me realise, because I was saying to him, I'm really struggling kind of like getting stuck with ideas. All of your videos, many of them have been filmed in my room or in my flat or like around the house. So he was like, I'm not sure, like I think that you could kind of still be doing work, because so much of my work is quite like introspective, and it's quite a lot about me. That a lot of it's just me filming myself around the flat. So I think kind of from that I was like, oh yeah, I really could be doing more like than what I am doing right now. In terms of what I actually have done though, I did kind of this quite short film. It was just literally about like repetitiveness in like the schedules, in like our schedules, like me and my boyfriend. And we are also planning kind of a little project more for his university work than for mine, but I wanted to like kind of get involved with something with a proper structure. So we were kind of, a lot of the work we're making is kind of unavoidably about quarantine basically, and it's kind of difficult to not do that just because it's so like it's just like everything right now. So we're taking from that, we're trying to like stay creative. I think it's difficult for everyone. I mean, we had a talk on like the chat about it, and I'm kind of struggling with it, but I think everyone's like struggling with it, so it's like nice to hear that it's not just me kind of being stuck.
Yeah, I think it's like really interesting to hear that other people have been like seeing, like finding that their work is about quarantine, because I was like having a conversation with somebody else that was like trying to still continue with filmmaking, but it was going to be in his living room, and it was like obviously it changes like the context of the work and things. And I think like even with my work at the moment, so like a lot of my work at the moment is existing on like a black background, which I've been able to kind of recreate with like a backdrop and things, but obviously like I think like even with that, it's still, because of the time that we're living in, it could still be viewed through the lens of feeling lost and like bleak. Like I don't know, like you could, like it kind of changes like the meaning of it, like just because of like what everybody's experiencing at the moment. Lucy, how have you been managing at home?
Yeah, it's been interesting for me because I've not been like with a set daily routine of like being creative, and this time been, yeah, like it's interesting to kind of, what am I trying to say? It's very hard to like get into this kind of like productive, like oh, you've got all this time on your hands. Like I got a furlough from my job, so I was like, oh, I have all this time on my hands, I can do all the things I want to do. I can make a film. I mean, I've been filming like random little bits around the house, but half the time I'm like, I have all this time and I don't know what to do with it, and it's really hard to be creative in that sense. I started like painting again, which I haven't painted in like 4 years, just to kind of, yeah, do something creative that doesn't necessarily have to be like, work. But it's been an interesting time. I never wanted to go out and film something more than right now. It's always like as soon as you can't do something, you want to do it. But yeah, it's been fun.
Alan, how do you feel about the lockdown and making work?
So I've kind of used it as a chance to try and find alternatives, especially when it comes to editing. I can't use Premiere at all at home, so instead I've been trying to find ways in which I can use kind of like free, like open source like software. So for example, instead of recording my own speech and having to edit all that, I've started using like a text-to-speech kind of program. And I'm trying to like play with that as more of an alternative. Or I've been using kind of like screen recorders, so I can start using footage from the internet. So I've started like recording myself using Google Earth, or kind of traversing archival material collected up. And it just comes down to trying to work with what I've already got instead of trying to make something new, I guess. It's more stuff like positioning statement that I'm finding myself struggling with, kind of having to actually like go back to that routine type stuff I'm so used to doing in uni is a bit more difficult now. But besides that, I'm finding myself adapting to some extent.
I think it's really interesting, like the use of the screen recording as well. Like I hadn't really thought about that, but like I guess that's like we're all experiencing each other through screens at the moment, so I think that's really interesting, like a good use of like an alternative. Yeah. Leo, how do you feel about the lockdown, and like how have you been making work?
So actually a lot of my films, I actually don't use a camera. It's I don't actually film anything. It's a lot of like images that I generate on my laptop, so I've been able to like still make them because of that. But obviously the installation aspect of it can't happen as of now. So I found myself having to like learn how to do 3D modeling and like on digitally, and then generating virtual reality like rooms, so you can kind of watch it inside a room, and then putting them on like YouTube. So hopefully that at least, even if I can't have an installation, I can like try and reach a large audience, and they can still, like, as much as it losing the physical aspect of it does impact it a lot, but hopefully you can still view my piece, like my piece of work, in like from home and in a relatively similar environment that I aimed for, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a really good alternative to use, like the 3D modeling. Like I've kind of tried to do similar things. I'm still kind of using Premiere Pro, but I find like Blender really hard. Like, what is the program that you've been using to do that?
I was actually like building like rooms on After Effects, and then because they have like similar 4D plugins, and then you can make the like layers and stuff into 3D, and then if you put like a camera inside, then when you export it, well, they do like there's a dynamic link thing where it takes it straight into Premiere Pro, and then it will like from the point of view of the camera, it will flatten the image, and then you've got a VR piece.
Yeah, that sounds really amazing.
That's so cool.
Yeah, like it sounds really cool.
It was so hard. I had to just once again just blunder my way through it, like try and work it out myself. It's so hard not being uni, but yeah.
Have any of you guys like done any thought about trying to do work in VR or AI or things like that? There's this artist I saw at the Giardini in Venice who did this AI piece. I think his name was like Ian Cheng. He did this AI piece called Bob, and on your phone you could like send things to this AI and it would interact with them, and it was like this huge video. Any of you thought about delving into those kind of things? I know they seem a bit sci-fi-ish, the VR and all of that, but anyone thought about that? Fairs, it's a tough one to think about, isn't it?
I feel like that's like focused like around your practice, because it's kind of like about the viewer, like mainly. Like have you done anything like that's like VR?
No, not at all. I know they have a VR kit at uni, but it's way too complex for me. I would love to, don't get me wrong, but yeah, I haven't.
Yeah, it looks like that's where we're heading with this the next question is, has your practice always been lens-based, and then if not, what have you done previously, and how do you view it in relation to your current practice? Do you want to begin, Archie?
Sure. No, I've not always been lens-based. Working my way through school, I was a painter, and then in my foundation started doing a bit of sculpture-y kind of bits. Came to uni, kind of stopped painting, just kind of, you know, you get to uni, there's loads of wood workshops and metal workshops and all of this great kit, and you're like, oh, if I'm just a painter, I'm just going to be using the painting stuff. So I really wanted to get in there and learn all the workshops and do all of that. So I think that made me be a sculptor, and then after doing a few bits of sculpture, I kind of landed in video. So I've kind of gone through them all and ended up here, which I'm glad I have ended up here. But I still want to do all the rest, you know. I still want to paint, I still want to do sculptures, but yeah, video is where it is at the moment.
Yeah, I feel like I've kind of done the same thing. Like I've kind of gone through all of the mediums. I think it's really important to kind of experiment with everything to kind of find out. And I kind of work conceptually, like with an idea, and then try and form that into whatever medium that might take. So yeah. Maddie, have you always? I feel like you might have mentioned earlier, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I kind of did, but yeah, no. So I used to do a lot of oil painting and portraits, that sort of thing. I also did in foundation, tried to be a lot kind of more conceptual, and it was kind of it was a lot of work that was just quite like introspective, just a lot more so, and almost like therapeutic, and it just became incredibly like frustrating. It was kind of like maybe like sculptural, a bit more like installation based, not film, kind of like painting, that sort of thing. It just got really frustrating when it didn't work because it was so like personal. It just felt like a kind of like upsetting almost. Anyway, but then when I kind of got into film in like kind of the start of first year, because I think it was because I really love like films, like I really love cinema, and it just, I think I was watching a lot of films, and I was watching a lot of shots, and I was like kind of like how the directors create shots, and I found it so interesting. I was like, it's something that I want to try, and it's just worked like kind of really well for me since then. So yeah, I mean, it's been about probably less than a year, but it's definitely kind of a better way of expressing what I want to express than kind of the other mediums that I've used before.
Yeah, that's cool. Lucy, have you always made films? How long have you been making films?
Well, I did media studies at A level, and I hated it because I had a really bad team where we had to make a music video. It's the worst thing that I've ever done. It's on the internet somewhere, but it's absolutely horrible. So I went into foundation and uni being like, I will never do anything with film because I hate it, because I hated media studies. And then we did the 90-second video in first year. I don't know if you guys have done that one. And I was like, oh, this is actually quite fun. I actually like this. And I was like, nope, let's not get into it again. I hated media. And then I just kept doing like paintings, a little bit of sculpture, and then it just kind of like progressed into film. And then I kind of just ended up there. And then my practice for like all of third year was just based on film. But I came into uni being very much a painter, like realistic portraits and everything. But now here I am.
I feel like everybody does the realistic portraiture thing, like it's just a thing, isn't it? Like I did it as well at A level, like painting oils and everything.
It's what they teach you in school, isn't it?
Yeah, so yeah, it's kind of like at A level we weren't really allowed to do anything else, so yeah. I was gonna say something. I've always been really, really rubbish with technology as well, so I feel like my kind of entry into film has kind of been so like just make it up as you go along, because I kind of like ever since I was really, really young just hated like phones and computers, and like I just like I'm like an old lady like trying to do things, so I just find it really weird that I've kind of come into it as well. I was just wondering like if anybody else was kind of like that, where they were kind of like if they value like paper and things. Like I just love paper. Like, I always have paper even if I don't need it, like, but I'm still like using like digital softwares all the time as well. Yeah, so Alan or Lucy?
Yeah, and I was just going to say that I like, the physical side of like analog film was definitely what drew me in to then digital filmmaking first, because again, the physical side of it, it was, I relate to the grandma-ness of just like being like, what does this do? I don't know. Let's try something else.
I think I'm the opposite. I think I like if I could digitize my whole life, I would do that. If I never had to write anything down and I could just, send it to this weird thing that would fly around and make notes for me, I would do that 100%. I've always been well into technology, always grown up with technology. And I think that's the reason I'm mainly drawn to it now. I detest writing and detest paper. I'm quite the opposite.
I feel like I'm kind of a mix of both of that though, because like I have like sketchbooks all the time, and I like having like writing and drawing. I like writing and drawing ideas. That's the only way I can feel like I can get it down. I can't type it out. It doesn't really make sense to me. But I really like making my work digitally because I feel like it's really forgiving in how, like, rather than like kind of making, I'm guessing comparing it to like paper, like painting, that sort of thing. I feel like it's very forgiving in terms of like editing and sort of like changing things around. It's just quite easy to do that, so it just feels like I can go over things 100 times and just like keep changing it until I'm happy with it, whereas I guess painting is a bit less so. Or like, I mean, so kind of sculpture and everything is, I mean, it's all kind of like you can change and edit it, but it feels like a little bit easier digitally, kind of.
Yeah, I feel like there's like a kind of thing with like painting where it's like it's really, really authentic, and then some people think that if you're doing it on a computer then it's kind of a bit cold and like not as kind of like intimate or something.
Yeah. Did you see that thing about David Hockney? Sorry, this is so irrelevant, but the thing about David Hockney switching from like painting to an iPad because he says he could just like carry every tool at once or something. Yeah, it's like that.
For like the ease of it. Yeah. Who is next? I've forgotten. Was it Alan? What was the question?
Whether film has always been your practice, right?
Oh yeah.
I kind of learned from a pretty young age that drawing and painting just didn't work for me. I was not very good at it. So I think before film, I mostly did sculptural stuff. I did some performance stuff, but I always loved cinema and always liked film. I think it was just a matter of time till I kind of accepted that I was willing to give it a go myself.
And like, do you feel like you are really good with technology, or do you kind of like resist it, or?
I think I'm sort of like a walking contradiction. Like I hate technology. I really don't like technology. I get frustrated very quickly with it. I think it has a horrible effect on people, and yet my entire practice is digital. So I don't know if I'm just in denial, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely relate with that. I feel like a massive contradiction. Yeah. Leo, how do you feel about like where you started out with film and technology and things?
So I feel like the same as pretty much everyone. I started like with drawing and then painting and then like the whole portraits thing. And then when my introduction to film was also the 90-second video thing at the end of first year. But during first year, I was actually doing like some sculpture and like a lot of woodwork. And then it's been sort of more, then it was like film throughout second year. And then, to be honest, right now I do a lot of sound work. And a lot of pieces are just sound. It's not even like an accompanying visuals or anything. But I also found myself doing a bit of performance, and oh god, I couldn't stand performance art. Like I used to hate it, and then I was doing it, and I was I was disappointed in myself. But in terms of like technology, I know I was just talking about the whole VR thing, but I also hate technology and really suck with anything. I just got lucky, just made it up and got lucky. But yeah, I'm also a granny.
Yeah, I find it really weird, like sometimes how you end up doing like the things that you never thought that you would do. But I like also always think that like the things that are hard are like the most worth doing as well. So I think it's always really good to like challenge yourself. So I feel like that's a big reason why I'm still kind of like persistent with film and things like that. I don't have any more questions, but does anybody else have any more questions or any thoughts?
No, I think we've done pretty well. That was great.
Yeah, that was really interesting. I really enjoyed like what everybody had to say. Thank you so much for being a part of this.
Yeah, cheers for coming out. Really been wicked. Cheers for anyone watching this, coming out on Friday. And I hope you enjoyed all the week of the stuff that's been out. Thanks to all these great artists for joining us. Yeah.